Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising. And we want to note that today is September 11th, and it was 22 years ago, right at this hour, probably close to this minute, because it was early in the morning around 8 o'clock in New York that the World Trade Towers were destroyed by incoming aircraft that we all saw with indelible memories, all of us, what happened on 9/11 22 years ago. And so we thought this week we would ponder the incident of 9/11, and we would look at it through the vector of the veterans. You know, 9/11 was an act of war in retaliation for the wars that the United States and others had been fomenting around the world, and particularly in the Middle East. And this act of war spawned further wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The mentality of war in the human species is deep. And the payment and the consequences, particularly for those who go through war and emerge either wounded in body or wounded in spirit with a post-traumatic stress disorder, is a scourge all over the world. There's no war that spares either the innocent or the guilty, either the civilians or those who fight. One thinks of the carnage going on right now in Ukraine and the tens, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians that have been decimated with the warfare going on in Ukraine. One thinks of the Russians, all the Russian young men that have been handicapped and destroyed. I read just the other week that the number of amputees alone in the Ukrainian side is more than the British suffered in all the years of World War I. And the number of casualties on the Ukrainian side is more than the casualty rate during the First World War, which destroyed millions and millions of lives. So we want to just feel the agony of what it means to be a veteran. We know, for example, that the veterans, particularly in the United States, have the highest suicide rate. I think 20 veterans commit suicide a day in the United States. That's the devastation that war leaves in the psyche of the warrior. So war is nothing, there's nothing glorious about war. There's nothing noble about war. It is carnage whenever and wherever it occurs. And as we've been talking over the last week with the emerging extraordinary disclosure around these unidentified anomalous phenomena, the one thing that humanity needs to do as we prepare ourselves for our extraterrestrial moment is to stop killing each other and to stop killing the planet. We have become a virus and we're destroying ourselves and our own host. And in order for us to move out into the next phase of human destiny, we have to unite. We have to harmonize with each other, harmonize with the larger ecology. And yet when we look around the world, all we see is destruction. So we're in an excruciating moment, everyone, as a species, as we come into the most important moment in the history of our species, you know, that we are not alone. We can look at ourselves with fresh eyes and realize that we are completely out of touch with reality as we know it. And so this reminder this week about 9/11 is a reminder of how far we need to go to become worthy of our planet and worthy as a species to guide our planet into interactivity with galactic civilizations which have contacted us and have been present on our planet for some time. So what we're going to do this week is we're going to have a series of interviews conducted by Dr. Stephanie Mines. She's an embryologist and an epidemiologist. She is also the founder of Climate Change and Consciousness. She's been a convener on a number of occasions over the last number of years on Humanity Rising. She's been passionate about regenerative health, and she's conducted a number of programs on regenerative health. And in fact, we've partnered at Ubiquity, we've partnered with her organization, and they are training people as we speak in how to develop proficiency in regenerative health. And then Ubiquity University is providing a master's and PhD degrees for the training that Stephanie and her colleagues are providing to the students. And you who know Stephanie know that she's deeply compassionate. She's been working with veterans for over 30 years. She's passionate about the veterans. Members of her own family went to war for one reason or another and came back as veterans. So she's seen firsthand what that means on a life. And so these are recordings that were made only over the last several days. Stephanie has moved from the Northwest of the United States out to Hawaii. So it's 5 o'clock in the morning there. She would have to get up around 4 o'clock in the morning to do that. So she asked if we would make a gracious exception for this week. So Georg and I have been coordinating with her. So we're now going to hear from Stephanie. It lasts about 45 minutes. And then I'll circle back, as I usually do after these presentations. And then we'll just have a dialogue, and we may interact with those of you in the chat group that are interested in making comments, and then we'll close the session off. So thank you, everyone. Welcome to Humanity Rising. In remembrance of 9/11, here is Stephanie Mines.
Greetings, friends. It's Stephanie Mines here from the big island of Hawaii. I've recently moved here, so I am missing my beautiful Tara behind me. And perhaps you can envision her, Tara, the goddess of compassion, accompanying us as we journey with eyes wide open on this anniversary of the tragedy of 9/11 and the enormous losses of that day. I want to begin by resourcing us, because this journey this week will take us into the depths of grief. We will hear voices from the grave. We will reach into our ancestral wisdom. We will, as a collective, come to an understanding about the legacy and lineages of violence and war that we have the capacity to transform. I want to begin with some of the exquisite energy medicine that was transmitted to me by my beloved teacher, now an ancestor, Mary Burmeister. She taught me the hands-on applications that I share with you so generously because I know they have the capacity to ignite our original brilliance. The heart opener that we'll do together is very simple. All the applications are very simple. We're going to bring the fingertips of the left hand to the right shoulder, the top of the shoulder. So I'm actually resting my palm on the top of my shoulder. So that's the area. It's the very top of the shoulder. Your fingertips will fall just behind the top of the shoulder, which actually is another important region that we're secondarily stimulating. Our focus is on the top of the shoulder, and the focus is intentional, my friends. We are bringing our attention to the top of the shoulder. And that sacred site is called unburdening. So by simply placing the palm there, we are beginning the process of unburdening ourselves from a sense of over-responsibility that is not helpful, that does not actually serve us. So we want the appropriate responsibility, the appropriate accountability that actually allows us to make a difference. The fingertips of the right hand are coming to this little valley right there. Sometimes the index finger fits perfectly there, right between the base of the hand and the somewhat protruding wrist bone. So by placing a finger, any finger, whichever, could even be the thumb if that's comfortable, whichever finger fits most neatly there, by holding these two sites together and dropping in as I'm doing, closing our eyes, and feeling the subtle refinements that navigate through the heart. This is the beginning sites of the heart flow, or the biofield pathway of the heart meridian. So that incorporates the organ of the heart. You are treating the organ of the heart, but you're simultaneously treating all the pathways of the meridian. So just feel into this, experience the subtle ways in which your heart, now on the opposite side of the one we're treating, which tells us about the cross-referencing of this system. So this flow brings in another energetic pattern, which is called the diagonal mediator, that actually weaves the right and left sides of the body, which is one of the ways in which the stimulation of the heart meridian helps us. When the heart meridian is touched into in this manner, it's not only the organ and the pathway of the meridian that is energized and toned, it is in fact everything related to the heart, which is everything in the body. And this is a correlation between the right and the left sides. Integration is one of the benefits of opening the heart. And you will see that you are able to breathe more deeply. Let's follow this attention to the heart, our highest intelligence, with an inju, which is called the heart protector inju. So here I'm showing you my left palm, and right between the little finger and the ring finger, I'm placing, it's my middle finger. It could be any finger. I could do it again with the index finger or even both fingers together. This is a completely forgiving system. There's no rule about what is right and what is wrong. We do what is comfortable and available. So using the combined ring finger, pardon me, index finger and middle finger, I'm applying a very slight pressure in that cartilaginous structure that is like a webbing between the little finger and the ring finger. This is heart protector strengthening. So this is strengthening the pericardium, the sac that surrounds the heart. And indeed, if the pericardium is not healthy and strong and able to do its work of boundary setting, the heart becomes increasingly more vulnerable. So we have spoken to the heart and given it our love, and we are doing the same for the heart protector, the pericardium. And now bringing the palms of the hands together, and definitely at the heart level, we seal this gentle transformational touch with alignment, further integration, further support for the heart. And seeing that there's actually an elasticity across the collarbones that manifests. I can feel it, perhaps you can see it. This inju or mudra, prayer posture, signifies I am the divine presence. I am the divine presence. You are the divine presence in the honorific center of the universe. Feeling that breath as it lightens your load, opens your heart, and increases your presence. So I want to refer to 9/11, the launch day of this series, Warriors Cry for Peace, in a way that perhaps you haven't considered before. I want to speak to and for those babies who were in utero at the time that 9/11 occurred. So as that tragedy unfolded, thousands upon thousands of women witnessing it perhaps on television, and for those actually living in proximity to the World Trade Center, perhaps seeing it out of their windows. And for those women, perhaps their partners were in the World Trade Center at that time. So I want to speak to those babies now in their 20s who were embryos at the time of 9/11. So just for a moment, bring your intention, your heart, your visualization to those babies at that time. My esteemed colleague, neuroscientist Rachel Yehuda, has actually done a longitudinal study about the impacts on those babies from the stressors their mothers evidenced as they experienced 9/11. Through Dr. Yehuda's research, we have taken a step forward in our understanding of epigenetics. I'm sure most of you understand epigenetics, but just for clarification's sake, epigenetics is the study of heritable changes in gene expression that are not reflected in changes in DNA sequencing. So these changes in gene expression, which are highly individuated, different for each individual, these changes cannot be detected in DNA sequencing or genetic inheritance in that regard, but they are nevertheless heritable and demonstrable. And indeed, that is what Rachel Yehuda found in the longitudinal study that tracked the stress levels, the blood chemistry levels, the cortisol levels, the anxiety levels in women, a select number, 38 women, who were pregnant and who lost someone related to them in the 9/11 tragedy. And what she found, in short, was that not only did those women have PTSD and high anxiety levels demonstrated by their blood chemistry, lower levels of cortisol, for instance, would be one indicator of that, increased panic responses, but their babies, their children, when they were born, similarly had that signature in their blood chemistry and in their lives. They were more prone to panic. And in fact, I would suggest that the meta crisis that we are seeing, witnessing, and experiencing through climate catastrophe would be an activator of a higher order for those children who are now adults, who are now young adults, finding their way, seeking a future with this history behind them. So please take that in for a moment, because it is a portrait of intergenerational trauma. It is a portrait of how violence is replicated. The purpose of this week-long series is to change that, to interfere with traumatic repetition, to end the lineage of violence, to dare to propose peace, to dare to propose an end to war and an end to violence. During this week, we will speak to the soldiers who, because of 9/11, enlisted and went to war, and their experiences in Iraq, for instance, we will speak to their family members. And sadly, we will speak to a family member who lost her son, who died by suicide because of his experience in Iraq and her attempts prior to his death to get the resources that he so desperately needed, and what she has done in loving memory of her son, and how she protects her grandchildren, the children of her son, from traumatic repetition. So this is a solutions-oriented broadcast. This is honoring grief, and at the same time, action-oriented in terms of transforming in our own lives, individually, wherever we are, transforming the traumatic repetition that we experience. So as I spoke to epigenetics and the research of Dr. Rachel Yehuda, I wonder if any of you considered the lineage in your own family. I would like to posit that we are all the children of veterans, that we are all from military families, and I'm speaking globally here. If we reach back into our histories, into the stories of our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents, the ancestors who line up behind us and who so dearly want us to not replicate shock and trauma, if we reach back consciously, clearly, in a well-boundaried way into those lineages on the right and left sides, both sides of our families, as far back as consciousness will allow, you will find the history of war in your family. And that history has been transmitted to you. Please reflect on this for a moment. Please reflect, as we do, on the losses of 9/11, the grief of 9/11, honoring those beings who gave their lives either through the direct attacks on the World Trade Center or by serving at ground zero and therefore being exposed to horrific toxins that have claimed thousands of lives, and those who enlisted as a result of 9/11, went to war, went to Iraq, brought home the consequences of that exposure on all levels, and the families that greeted them when they returned. I'm the author of They Were Families, How War Comes Home. I'm also the author of New Frontiers in Sensory Integration, which is a book that's evolved out of my research with the families of veterans and the sensory integration needs of their children. In that research, which ultimately resulted in peer-reviewed clinical studies and the book New Frontiers in Sensory Integration, I discovered that the children of veterans are 80% more likely to be diagnosed with autism or to have sensory integration or learning challenges. That's quite an astounding discovery. It further points to the epigenetic, intergenerational ramifications of war and violence. And as I said, our goal during this week is to look squarely in the face of what has been wrought by 9/11, grieve for the losses, all of them comprehensively, but also to form a resolve to end traumatic repetition, to end the lineages of shock, trauma, violence, and yes, war. I'm so grateful to Humanity Rising, which creates a completely unique platform that allows conversations like this to happen in every way that they can occur, and for allowing me to do these programs by recording due to my schedule, because I quite honestly could not be stopped from my commitment to shed light on the lives of our veterans and their families, a demographic that is somehow isolated, cut off from the rest of humanity in their own cubicle, in their own sector, because there hasn't been enough willingness to see the similarity, the connectivity, the fact that we are all the families of veterans, we are all the children of war, and we are all capable of ending that lineage and starting a new lineage where the children of the future can thrive without the haunting inheritances of violence. And I will say this, self-perpetuated suicide. During this week, I will incorporate an understanding that climate crisis is in fact a byproduct of the suicidal urges that lead us to violence and war. The despair that afflicts the people of the age of those who were babies in utero during 9/11, those who were babies in utero during 9/11, you might say this whole program is dedicated to them. Those who were babies in utero during 9/11 are the young adults now, looking at a future marred by climate crisis in such extreme that places like Lahaina in Maui, my neighbor island, look like a war zone. And indeed, Lahaina is a war zone because of the violence inflicted on Lahaina, on Maui. The wildfires on Maui were not really wildfires. They were fires inflicted by colonization, by racism, by ignorance, by ignoring the needs of the people of Maui. Eyes wide open is my plea. It is the voice of my original brilliance. And original brilliance is a concept that I introduce in the regenerative health program, the MA PhD program of Ubiquity University that originated here on Humanity Rising. And I mention this because that's one of the action items that I will suggest as a problem-solving direction on the healthcare level, on the level of delivering healthcare resources. Regenerative health for a climate-changing world empowers us to do what couldn't be done for some of the veterans whose stories you will hear this week. Veterans with head injuries who were not treated for those head injuries, veterans with exposures to toxins who were not treated for those toxic exposures, the resources that were not provided for veterans very naturally reeling from shock and trauma. Those resources can be provided at the grassroots level and must be. We can't wait for the understanding at hierarchical levels of a completely dissolving medical system to catch up with what is at our fingertips, what we can do. And you'll hear from the people who knew that and who long to spread the message of grassroots empowerment and to be inclusive of our veterans. So one of the purposes of this week launching on 9/11 is to encourage, I would say insist, that we wake up to our kin, our veterans, that we look at their lives with the compassion that they deserve, not as people over there who were in the military, but people in here who have a lineage of shock and trauma from military experiences transmitted epigenetically and which are heritable. So how can we not pass on the lineages of shock and trauma? So as I've been speaking, perhaps some of you have been reflecting on your own personal histories, your family histories of military and war experience. Very often, those histories were stuffed and locked up. They were not spoken of. This seems to be a global response to the magnitude of shock and trauma that occurs in military theaters, in theaters of war. People come home from war and clam up, retreat, withdraw, shut down. They don't have the words. There's a quality of regression into a state of being muted. There's a fear of harming others. And there is an incredible fear of reactivation. But that does not mean that the message is untransmitted. It is transmitted non-verbally. It is transmitted energetically. And therefore, it is possible that we have received those messages, even though no one ever spoke of their military experience. So remember the babies in utero during 9/11. Today especially is devoted to those babies who are now young adults. Those babies in utero, hormonally, biochemically, received the shock and the trauma and the violence and the agony and the nightmare of 9/11, even though it wasn't spoken of to them. They were there with their mothers, standing at the windows, looking at the burning towers. Just as right in Maui, women were pregnant as those fires struck, and their babies felt the horror and the panic. And those babies felt the ways in which their mothers were being abandoned, left without resources. We want to honor the consciousness of that intergenerational transmission and garner the skills to meet those humans and be of service to them. That is also the purpose of this week. I will say that is also the purpose of regenerative health for a climate changing world. Those resources are within the regenerative health program, and the cultural and trauma-informed sensitivity to be of service and to change the direction of intergenerational transmission so that it is grounded and ceremonialized and dissipated, and the burden is taken off, particularly the shoulders of our little ones. And most importantly, that we actively engage in all the ways that we're capable in ending war, in ending violence. We are the warriors who cry for peace. Now is when warriors, I am a warrior, no doubt. Now is when I, the warrior, heart unburdened and open, cries for peace. Treating the opposite side, placing that opposite hand and the one you used previously on the opposite shoulder, and bringing whatever fingertips work easily into that little valley between the base of the hand and the wrist bone, letting the fingertip rest there, closing your eyes. Breathing in, and perhaps you're noticing a pulsation in the top of the shoulder and that little valley on your wrist. The top of the shoulder position is called unburdening, where your fingertips are falling behind the top of the shoulder is further assisting the unburdening by opening the respiratory channels. The place on your wrist is called the connector. This little wrist position is your primary source of integration. You can hold these positions, and it's amazing. It is truly amazing what you are igniting, resurrecting in your body by holding these positions, top of the shoulder and base of the hand, right in the valley, alongside the wrist bone. You are igniting what are called the rivers of splendor, the energy systems that were forming in those babies in utero when 9/11 happened. This is a teaching, my friends, right now. This is a regenerative health teaching. Those babies in utero, at the moment that 9/11 happened in 2001, those babies were experiencing the evolution of the rivers of splendor, the energetic structures that support prenatal development as 9/11 occurred. And of course, those formations were battered, as all of us who have experienced overwhelming events when we were incubating suffered some battering of those extraordinary meridians, the rivers of splendor. But here's the beauty, my friends. By holding these positions, we are bringing out of their latency those energetic pathways that are weaving right now across the body, right to left, the central channel that forms our midline, our spinal structure, our integrity, and of course, the heart, the pericardium, and the intelligence of the heart. The brain forms out of the connective tissue of the heart. Heart-based intelligence. That's our problem solver, and we are feeding it right now. And let's similarly hold the heart protector in you on the opposite hand to that which you touched before. It really doesn't matter if you began with the right or the left, you're going to treat the opposite now. And these responses in your nervous system calibrate themselves. They will integrate as you need them, removing obstructions that are unique to you and setting up a tensegrity that is also completely unique to you. And always balancing the shifts, subtle, so subtle you may not even be sure it has happened, but you will know over time these practices will speak to you. You will recognize them. And every time we return to the palm inju, we further strengthen the midline, so we further strengthen integration. I want to share with you some of the speakers and the experiences coming during this week. As I mentioned, we are going to hear directly from someone who, as a result of 9/11, enlisted and was sent to Iraq. And we are going to hear about his experiences and the teachings that he assembled from more than a decade of reflection on that choice. We're going to also hear from family members, including one who lost her son to suicide and what she has done in the wake of that tragedy. we are also going to hear voices from the grave, the voices of those who died, and how those voices have reverberated and found a yearning expression that speaks to each and every one of you listening, watching, participating in this program, who longs from your heart to be an instrument of peace, to end war. Dare we believe it is possible? Dare we envision it? Dare we invest actionably on the ground, one foot in front of the other, one prayer in front of the other, to invest in an end to war? It seems impossible. And yet I know in my mother's heart that we will do it. We will do it. And I am planting those seeds, and you are planting those seeds when you take the steps to honor all babies in utero during this meta-crisis time we inhabit together, and believe that we can manifest a world in which children can thrive. This is a program of enormous faith. This is a program of enormous daring. And I reach from my mother's heart into yours, from the space of the crone, that I celebrate the wisdom of the mother trees, the visionary, the undying visionary, calls to you here and now. I am a warrior, and I cry for peace. Thank you. See you tomorrow. Please reflect on your ancestry and transmute the lineage of shock and trauma in your bones.
That was Stephanie Mines from Hawaii with a very heartful plea for those little babies in utero. I feel that very strongly, actually. My daughter-in-law is pregnant with her first child. She's about halfway through the pregnancy, and we've been tracking it week by week, all the little changes in the baby and the placenta, and whether everything's positioned correctly, and discussions with the midwives and various medical diagnostic tests that are conducted these days. And, you know, you think of just the fragility of life and the absolute vulnerability of the children in utero. And if their parents are anguished or stressed in acute ways, it goes right into the baby because there's no defense mechanisms to keep anything out. So anything that the mother eats, the baby eats, and anything that the mother feels, the baby feels. And it's really extraordinary responsibility we have to the unborn. And each day, as Stephanie said, she'll be bringing to our attention more information through various interviews and dialogues that she'll be having with various people as we commemorate 9/11, and also how, as she stated, how can we even begin to imagine a world beyond war and beyond violence and beyond both self and planetary destruction. So that brings us to a close for today, everyone. I want to thank you all. You're all welcome to the after session chat. You received the link in all of those of you who have received reminders of the call. And it's also up in the chat box, those of you who are watching us on Zoom. And we'll see you then tomorrow for our second of 5 sessions on a commemoration of 9/11 with a particular focus on our veterans. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.